There we go. We're recording. Hello.
Hello.
Oh. All right. So this is the first ever CampaignSick book club live stream, and we are reviewing Pole Dancer, Poll, by Laura Heffernan. We're going to start out giving some introductions about why we're at least experts in part of the premise of this book, and then answer some questions and just do a little bit of chit chat. And then I'm going to post it online to share with the CampaignSick Nation. So I'm Nancy. I write CampaignSick. I've also been working on Democratic political campaigns for the past 14 years all across the country. And I am right now speaking from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Alana, do you want to intro yourself?
Sure. I'm Alana. I have been 1 year shy of Nancy, so I've been working on political campaigns for the past 13 years. And I'm currently quarantining in Washington, D.C.
Hey, I'm Candy. I am a tiny baby in politics compared to these veterans, but I've been working in the party for 4 years, the Democratic Party. And prior to that, I did a lot of local party activism and internships and all that good stuff. But working for the party for 4 years, and I feel like I'm uniquely qualified for this book because my name is Candy. So I have had people asking me if I am a pole dancer my whole life.
Is your full name Candy, or is it Candy?
Yes.
Oh, it is
Candy. So yes.
Cool. So I guess, like, spoiler alert for anyone who is planning on reading this book, I can sort of summarize really quickly about what the book was about, and then we can get into our opinions. So essentially, there's a woman who is not a stripper, but is a pole dance instructor in upstate New York, and her business is being threatened or shut down by a right-wing politician who's running for state senate and thinks what she's doing is immoral. So long story short, she decides to run, and chaos ensues.
In a special election.
In a special election, yes. Yeah. In a special election. There's also like a little bit of a romance element to this book, which is funny because when I looked the book up online, like the first 3 reviews were like, there's not enough romance. I wanted this to be a romance book. Whereas I feel like we all read it and we're like, this is not about the mechanics of a campaign. I was told otherwise. So I just wanted to start with a couple of things. What do you think the book got right?
So, okay. Not that this is a priority for candidates to be doing, but the mechanics of how a hand dial voter call goes was described accurately in the book, although they had the candidate doing it, and that is not a good use of candidate time.
I mean, I'll push back a little bit and say if it's a special election that can be won by 15 votes, as this one was, maybe it is a good use of candidate time.
Sure. I will give you that. So I think they got that right. Nancy and I actually talked about this a little bit, but we've had differing, one thing that got featured in the book was that they initially had a woman come in to work as an image consultant for this pole fitness instructor. And I have managed a race for a female candidate that was required to meet with an image consultant in order to get endorsed by a local progressive women's group and get funding from them. Yes, it was disturbing that is the case. I'm totally with you on your face, Candy. But so I will say that I have been in a situation where I was working with a female candidate who was required to work with an image consultant. So that part was not inaccurate from my experience.
Candy, have you ever heard of or seen that?
I was going to say, I think that the way that in general the image was so prevalent, even for a relatively small local race for a woman candidate, seemed pretty on point. obscenely on point. I think that was correct. I also think that the conversations around like voter turnout in a special election seemed like more realistic, although towards the end it got a little crazy. But but in general, that like attitude of, you know, we need interns to make calls because every voter counts. I think that messaging is about right for a special election like that. So
yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think the number one thing that I got right was just like the misogyny toward female candidates, and just the double standard with another spoiler alert. So her opponent is a closeted gay Republican, and his personal life did not come up because she wanted to take the high road. I'm actually surprised that no consultants were pushing her to not take the high road, but I guess upstate New York in a book is a special place full of kind-hearted people.
Also, friends with the Republican?
Yeah.
yeah.
Like that happens. Like the way in which they were friends and friendly seemed like you can be friends with a Republican. You're not gonna be friends with I mean, maybe you will. I don't have friends who are Republicans by and large, so I'm not great to talk on this point, but like, I think if you're friends with a Republican, you're not friends with a Republican who is such a blatant hypocrite on morals, like, and then you're also the chair of the party. Like, what was even, I think maybe that's the next question, like, what was even Daniel's job, and was that realistic at all?
So this was actually so I took highlights of little notes in the book where I was like, this is wrong. And one of the first highlights I took was, so there is a character named Daniel. He is the chair of I believe the way they phrased it, it seemed to be like the county Democratic Party. So he's the chair of the Democratic Party. He's the one who like this fitness instructor goes to talk to get like support to run for office. All of that tracks. I've definitely
making out
those sorts of conversations happening with local party chairs to like get their sign off before someone wants to run. Not that it's required, which is definitely how they made it seem in the book. But what isn't accurate is that generally that party chair is someone who like is a former candidate or activist, but is primarily responsible for fundraising. They do not know campaign strategy. And in this book, that individual then took on the job as her campaign manager. And I have never met a party chair who would actually be have the necessary background and experience to manage a race.
So I don't know how things are in New York. I would say in like thinking of like Oregon, it is not that uncommon for like young political staffers to also like run for like local party officer positions here. Our county parties are much more focused around like organizing and like volunteer based, maybe some fundraisers, but not like huge big fundraising. So like our like young Democrats, we like try to like funnel them into like, here's a job, and also like, why don't you become a vice chair of a county party because you actually know how to use the van, right? So like but I don't know if that's realistic for upstate New York. Like I went to college in Vermont, and all of the people that I met when I was in college in New England were like old people who did not know how to use computers, but that was also 2008. So
I mean, I think like with anything, your mileage may vary in terms of county chairs. I've definitely known county chairs who had or were capable of managing a campaign. The thing that was so unrealistic to me is that in like this random middle of the year special election, this guy had like his full-time job was being the county chair.
Right.
In like a fancy office. Which,
right.
Like, in at least where I am, like that is only true of our state chair, and in other states, like I don't even know that it's true of the state chair.
Well, and even especially in a red district, right? Like in Oregon, our state chair is a volunteer position. A couple of county parties with year-round offices, like most of them just open one up for the cycle, but the county offices are in counties that are blue strongholds where there are a lot of Democrats who are giving money to help fund that. Like, I just can't imagine a red Senate district being in the same place as a county office.
My biggest thing is like when it is not like in an election cycle actively, like, are those offices A, staffed full time, and B, by people wearing suits?
No.
Well,
no.
The idea that there is a campaign office staffed full time with someone in a suit is, I think, one of my biggest
with a staff, right? Like, these campaign offices are usually, it's like retirees that are willing to like take shifts throughout the week, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know what's going on with that.
So, like, I already shared this with Alana, but the thing that I found the least realistic in the book and that bothered me the most has nothing to do with politics. It was that, like, when she's all upset and she gets in a fight with Daniel and she goes over to Lana's house, Lana meets her with a blender full of mimosas. Why would you put mimosas in a blender?
You don't make any sense.
That would break bubbles.
That's sloppy.
Also, who has time to blend things? Like, just put the wine in a glass.
I know, per demonstration. We're all drinking rosé, like, just, I guess, in keeping with our basic.
We did not rearrange this at any point. We just all independently chose rosé.
So, actually, speaking of the basicness level of this book, which is no judgment, like, I think we could all use a little, a little lighter reading. I'm interested, just for informing this conversation, if this, like, genre, like, taking away the political piece, but just sort of like the light chick lit drama or genre is something that you both read or have read.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Oh yeah.
I don't tend to read this kind of book. The closest thing is over, like, fall and winter, I read some wine country mysteries by Ellen Crosby, which I super recommend, which was the first fiction I had read in, like, literally 10 years. So I don't have a perspective, but I'm interested to hear what you guys think of, like, in terms of the people who are like, this isn't a good for this genre book. Like, is it? Did it follow what you expected it to follow?
No. I'm with the people who complained. I was reading this as kind of like a hate read for political literature.
Yeah.
Not as a chick lit. I would also say that it, like, there's what normally the, like, flow from chick lit, it follows that standard flow of, like, connection, barrier, overcome barrier, right? But, like, it just kind of was like, there wasn't enough of a, like, connection story built.
Yeah.
Except for, like, spoiler, they kiss. Before, and, like, that they have an attraction before things, like, before there's a barrier placed. And so I, like, normally when there's a barrier placed, you're, like, disappointed because you're rooting for them. But at this point, I'm like, I don't know. I don't care. Like, I wasn't invested in.
Yeah, I feel like it was, I guess, I feel like it was felt more like a young adult literature, if that makes sense. Like, and don't get me wrong, love that, right? Like, on a camping trip, you better believe I'm going to reread Sister to the Traveling Pants, right? You gotta get that stuff that's easy, that doesn't hurt your brain. But I think for adult women, when we read books of this genre, you want things to be a little more steamy. You want things to be a little more realistic. And I just feel like all of the relationships in this book, whether they are the romantic relationship or the friendship relationships, are very surface level.
Very wonderful.
Right? Like, if I had been this woman, like, running for office, and my best friend, well, first of all, I would have said, hey, best friend, why don't you just run for Senate? You're incredibly qualified. But also, and my best friend saw me being treated this way by my consultants. It wouldn't have been, here's a mimosa. It would be like, you need to fire this person. Like, this is not how any of this works. So it just felt very surface level. And, like, if I was 16, it would have been, like, much more age appropriate, I guess. But
I want to be clear, I'm like obsessed with Hallmark Christmas movies, so I'm not in any way putting myself above the genre, and also like a little bit familiar with how it's supposed to go. But yeah, like I mean, again, if you're planning on reading this book, just stop, read the book. It won't take you that long, and then watch this. But yeah, they went from they kissed once to him being like, "I'm in love with you." Like,
Yeah.
Mike and I had been dating for like 2 months before he said that, and I was still like,
well, and like it's his career too, right? Like, let's just be clear, he is her staff.
yeah.
That is a line that you should not be crossing. Democratic politicos watching this, just don't do it. The campaign isn't that long. Lock it up. But
Sleep with your staff.
right, like they kiss once, and then he's like, I'm gonna do this thing that I know is completely bad for you as the candidate, for me as like an employee of you, and I'm just gonna wreck my life for someone I've known for 2 weeks, a week and a half, however long.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So my biggest frustration with this book, and I was going to pose this as a question, but rather than like ask a question just so I can answer it, I'm just going to throw it out there and then let you both react to it. The thing that bothered me the most about this book, like both as a Politico and just a woman reading it, was like, she's running against this guy who's an asshole. Her campaign manager, as much as he seems like not an asshole, like seems to be leading things. And at the end of the day, the like problem came down to women cutting down other women, which may happen in some situations, but I just was like, this is so old. Like, let that guy be a piece of shit. Why does it have to be his mom and his like childhood friend? Like, why does it have to be like women not respecting each other's sexuality when, like, yes, that happens, but I think it is more frequent and prominent that men are leading the don't respect women conversation.
Well, and in fact, they were, right? Like, right. Her campaign manager, who's supposed to be this like hotty-toddy boyfriend boy, was allowing her to be mistreated by this consultant that he hired, that he brought in, and was gaslighting her when she was complaining about it. And then the like crux of the story is still, it's the women. And it's like, no, wait a second. We got a lot of problems here. We've got a closeted Republican man who is like hiding his true self. We've got, and who, by the way, doesn't actually want to be a senator. We've got a male campaign manager who's sleeping with his candidate while gaslighting her about how she's being mistreated on her.
Young adult.
Trying to.
Kissing faces.
Yeah. Kissing faces. Being inappropriate. He's trying to smash. It's like, I just don't understand how this book was written by a woman.
I think, like, yeah. I mean, there is something to be said. And, like, I don't want to beat down on this Laura Heffernan character too badly because I enjoyed reading this book despite all my qualms with it. I think, like, that's the trope, right? And I think, like, even a poorly written or, like, poorly researched, which I would give this, like, a B for research. Like, I didn't think it was terrible. But even that, like, it could not be published if there wasn't a kernel of truth that that's at least the perception, right? Like, there are sometimes, I've certainly been in conversations about women saying, oh, she can't run for office, she has a nose ring, or whatever the situation is. So, like, that is a thing that happens. But obviously I am, and I assume like you both are, just very sensitive to the narrative that, like, it's women policing each other. Because even when they are, like, why is that happening? Yeah. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So let me ask this then. Let's flip it in a positive light. What was your favorite thing about the book? What did you like about the book?
I loved that anytime someone tried to imply that, like, she isn't qualified because she was a stripper, she was like, I'm a pole dancer, which is different, but even if I was a stripper, that's okay. Like, it's okay to support sex workers. And, like, I was like, yes.
I loved the way that she handled the debate. Like, I thought it was great. I also, sorry, my cat may try to join. I thought the way that she handled herself in the debate was amazing. I think she did a great job. I totally supported her walking out when the Republican candidate was literally straight up insulting her morals. And I also think it was ridiculous that the moderator of the debate let that happen.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like the moderator was a PTA president, not a trained. Not there's anything wrong with being a PTA president, but maybe dubious what kind of training she may or may not have had to lead this debate, other than being just a local leader in her community.
But was also a woman and should not let those things happen to other women.
That's fair.
In the same chain of, this was not great in the way that it allowed for those sorts of things.
Yeah, it was ballsy too. He sent her that message. It was oh, thank you for not outing me to my mother, but then I'm gonna show these pictures of you kissing your campaign manager. He's playing a dangerous game.
Also, I hate him so much.
Strategically, I get, that was not a good use of those photos. I'm just gonna say that. No one gives a shit about a PTA debate. Nobody attends the debates. Maybe it was live streamed. Nobody's gonna watch it. If he really wanted to use those photos, leak it to your press, or get a local political blogger to put it up.
I mean, we know how social media is viral in this town because that's how this whole thing started. Put that shit on Instagram.
Thank you.
Get the TikTok teens to do something.
I'm just saying, they put way too much prominence on a local debate, and the only people who care about the debate are the people hosting, or in that level of candidacy, the only people who care about the debate are the two candidates, their staff, and the people hosting the debate.
Even I would argue on a national stage, in a general election. I was gonna call it a non-primary, and I was wait, we have a word for those. I'm looking at it written in front of me. Even then, people's minds aren't really made up by a debate. Yes, the only difference though, I guess, is in a national election. If someone had pictures of one of our candidates making out with their campaign manager, that would be news, and that would generate the kind of press we're talking about.
Right. And would
throw also, who's letting people put pictures at a debate? I'm just very confused.
Why are you putting out pictures? Yeah. I do think one of the things that I liked about the book, or appreciate about the book, is that even though those sort of details weren't always right, I do think it accurately captured the experience of running in a very fast special election where you don't have political experience. I think just the overwhelmingness of it, I was wary going into this that it was going to be okay, now she has a team of 19 people and she's doing meet the press. I think the types of activities she was engaged in and her experience as a candidate were probably fairly accurate.
I'll agree to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that was great. I mean, the book was really fun. I like that campaign staff are a character in the book and not just her staff came into the room, right? I think that is always nice for obvious reasons. I do just, the more I think about Daniel, the more I'm mad about how mediocre he is at his job.
I'm imagining he's got to be super hot.
He has to be. But I'm just thinking about how did he have this supposed best friend who is Laura, right? Or Lana, who's one of his best friends, who's sitting right there living in the district, and he couldn't find a single Democrat to recruit to run for this seat.
So I'll defend that for Daniel, which is that he had a candidate lined up and but it was a candidate who was ready, who was going to run for the general, so like thought they had extra time, and I guess he was trying to convince that candidate to run in the special, and the candidate like chose not to last minute, so like he kind of got thrown for a loop. I will defend his theoretical candidate recruitment skills there.
It also seemed to me like Lana had said no.
Okay. All right, fine.
But
because she asked Lana to run, and Lana's like, no, I'm busy being a hotshot attorney. And then I guess at some point in the very little weeks that this campaign is going on, Lana changes her mind.
Well, I think she thought she wasn't going to win. Then.
That's fair.
And was trying to support her best friend. I will say, like, I am going to not to, like, push back on all of your hot Lana takes, Candy, but I do think, like, even though Lana seems like she had worked in the legislature or, like, interned with the legislature and, like, was familiar with it, it wasn't like she was, like, a campaign staffer or a candidate. And so I think she might have been a little bit clueless too and trusted Daniel. And when Daniel was like, we need to hire this person, this is necessary, like, wasn't in the position that one of us would be to be like, no, you fucking don't. There are other
No, I completely agree with that. Like, I just think, like, I've got friends who don't work in politics, and I guess my point was just not that I like I like that character a lot. I think she's great, but just in general, like, when we were talking about the relationships being like really juvenile, but like in adult relationships, I have friends that don't work in politics that if they're being mistreated by management at their work or things like that, I'm just like, hey, maybe don't let them do that. You know, so I just can't imagine adult women.
Like, fired Erica at one point.
Yeah.
But then
later, though.
To fire Erica?
Sorry?
But then wasn't allowed to fire her?
Yeah. I mean,
It
makes sense that Lana can't fire Erica. It makes less sense that Mel can't fire Erica.
Yeah.
I think, so scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate this book? 10 being like everyone should read it, 1 being like that was a waste of my brain.
If you're reading this, you are probably campaign staff. Or if you're watching this, you're probably campaign staff. In which case, I will say it is like $1. And it is a fun thing to do on a break from call time. So I would say 7.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was going to give it a 7 or an 8 for that purpose. Like, it's fun. It's not like high literature, but it was fun. And if you have the Kindle Unlimited, it's actually included for free. So highly recommend.
I feel bad because I was going to give it a 4. Like, but that said, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think you could, like, if you were like, I'm going to read this, I wouldn't be like, no, don't read that. Or I'd be like, oh, that's fun. But I can't say that I would actively recommend reading this book to anyone who wasn't like a pole dance instructor running for office. In which case, for that, you should absolutely read this book.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had like a staffer friend that was like, I'm going camping this weekend, give me something to read around the campfire, I would be like, yes, read this trash book.
I love that, like, a beach read for you is a camping read.
Yeah, I live in Oregon. You know what I mean, though. Like, you know, sometimes you just need a trash book.
It's a beach read for sure. Like, I think I will say if I had a female friend who was a campaign staffer who was like, hey, I'm going on vacation, I need a dumb book, then this is what I recommend.
So I actually have been intentionally choosing beach reads. Like, I've still been actively reading during this cycle, and I've been choosing like low impact kind of like beach read vacation books. I like to refer to them as airport literature because they are books that I could likely find at like an airport bookstore. which is never quality. But I've been intentionally reading those during this cycle because like the last thing that I want to do at the end of the day is like read something deep or hard or like tough. Like I just want to like I've been enjoying the escapism of it. So it's been like chick lit and dystopian future novels all the way.
Just to be clear again, to like knock myself down off the high horse I seem to be getting on, it's not like, am I reading this or Tolstoy? It's like, am I reading this or nothing? Or playing like fishdom on my phone. So like, I'm not at all like saying, oh, this is not high enough literature for me.
Yeah, I'm all about the like this kind of content right now. I'll be completely honest with you. I watched this week on the TV for the first time the entire Twilight saga. Don't recommend, but I did it and it was awful. And but that's like where my brain is with content, is it's like I can't watch things that are gonna make me cry because every time I open Twitter I cry. So
I on recommendation of one of my supervisors, last night while I was building scripts in Through Talk, I started watching season 3 of Love Island UK.
Oh wow.
And that's what I was doing for the like 30 minutes in between conference calls before I joined this.
I feel like that level of sexiness would upset me at this point. It would be triggering.
I actually paused the challenge where like the men are like standing on this wall and the women like stick their hands in little slots to like touch them and then rate their bodies.
Body reading? No body reading. Not about that.
Very, very funny.
Well, yeah, I feel like this is the same as that content. Yeah. So if you are a campaign staffer and you want that kind of book content, this is the read for you.
Exactly. Would anyone mind if I go through the like 3 things that I noted in this book that just like really bugged me?
Not at all. I was actually going to say like let's all share everything else we wanted to share so that we can wrap this up and then we can keep like I can hit pause and we can tell the real tea.
Yeah. So the first thing is that she talks about the state senate and the state legislature, and then says in all other states apparently, but Nebraska is unicameral.
Yes, I noticed that too. Thank you.
So I got mad about that. Nope. There is one state that is unicameral. Second of all, what state senate is on a 2-year cycle?
I did not catch that. That's a good question.
Yeah, the states they talk about how both the state senate and the House are on a 2-year cycle. I will admit I have never worked in New York. I'm just operating under the assumption the New York State Senate is not under a 2-year cycle because I am not aware of any state senate that is on a 2-year cycle.
So I'm looking.
I just explained that in my brain as like she's running for the special and then it's gonna have to be up in 2 years because that's when what my brain like immediately explained that as.
They talked about that and they were like, you're gonna have to run again in November. But then they said 2-year cycle and I was just like, nope.
I just looked this up because I was embarrassed that I didn't know off the top of my head because I am from New York and they do indeed serve 2-year terms.
What? Okay, I'm sorry, author. You were right.
I should have known that because I watched The Politician in this pandemic. I should have known.
I did. I'm from New York, although in my defense, I've only worked in city politics, not in state politics. But I become more and more of a Minnesotan every day, I guess.
Hey, I'm super sorry to the author. You were right. 2-year, and apparently New York State is the place where state senators have 2-year cycles. So that's crazy. Okay. But next piece is they talk about Daniel's sister donates the space where they have her initial fundraiser. And his exact quote was, she donates the space periodically for events in exchange for the tax write-off.
Oh, you were
studying it.
I will say that having worked many cycles in Virginia, there is actually a certain amount that you can do that is tax deductible for your state income tax for giving. It's very small. very, very
Yeah,
small.
in Oregon, it's like $100 for a married couple.
Right. And so you can actually, on the state income tax in Virginia, if you are a Virginia resident and you give, you can write off a certain amount. I think it's like $35. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've worked in Virginia. But so I do believe that. But the idea that a corporation would do that, B, that they would donate a whole ballroom space so that the tax write-off was enough for that is unbelievable to me.
I can't believe that's like legal for campaign finance purposes.
You
Like
never know. I don't know New York State finance laws. Like, again, I worked in Virginia where like any campaign finance is legal.
I will say, again, I've only worked in the city, but the city finance laws are like super strict.
Yeah, in Oregon, it's pretty much the Wild West, but even we couldn't do that. Like we have to, if we have someone that wants to make a huge donation like that, it has to be like an in-kind for like a sponsorship or something like that. Like it can't just be here's a free space for this fundraiser.
It would be in kind.
Right. But it's not a tax. I don't know. It's
not a tax write-off. Yes, I'm with you for that. Okay, so two more things. Mm-hmm. One is the idea of having a candidate make daytime phone banking. Just made me mad. Just in general.
Seniors.
Did not say it was a senior list.
Maybe that just okay.
I will grant.
I'm gonna again give it a pass because it's such a low turnout election.
Yes. So then the next one is and this is my last one, is that she actually connected with a voter while doing her daytime phone banking and was talking to the person on her list, and the person was unregistered.
I don't remember this part, but
the quote from the woman was, "That all sounds lovely, dear. I'll be sure to register before November."
I read that as just that the woman was a moron and didn't know that she was registered to vote and that there was an election coming up.
Which, realistic. Not that all voters are morons, but realistic. People who don't know that they're registered, who are registered on your list for sure.
I read it as, and this is totally legitimate that someone who doesn't work in this industry would not know it, but I read it as like the person thought that the call list was just like a phone book.
Mm. That's entirely possible also.
Also possible. All right. Candy, any closing thoughts that you have? Because we're coming up on an hour.
Yeah, just in Oregon, we don't do special elections for state legislative seats, and I highly recommend it to everyone. We do a appointment process. It's pretty great. We have precinct committee people. They vote in a convention. We fill a vacancy. Doesn't cost $1 billion to do a local election, and I highly recommend that everyone tries that.
Yeah, so. There are a lot of things we can learn from Oregon, like voting by mail.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's do closing thoughts and your prediction for what happens in the next book.
I think in the next book, they will be in love. And their relationship will advance way too quickly and seriously. I think that there will be some inappropriate behavior inside of the New York State Capitol, which is actually exciting because that's a beautiful building. And hijinks will ensue.
Excellent. Lana, what are your predictions?
I think Lana gets a romantic interest. I'm really hoping it's not a staffer.
Yeah.
Or a Republican senator.
People who you can fire.
I'm actually not opposed. Like, let's be honest, Mary Madeline, James Carville, I'm not opposed to it being a Republican senator. I'm just opposed to it being a staffer.
I think that's a fair take. I think my predictions for the book, first of all, Curtis winds up being Lana's chief of staff. And number two, since the next book is called The Accidental Senator, I think Lana is for some reason like incapacitated, like sick or appointed to something. And for some reason, Mel has to wind up stepping in as like the second vote getter.
I'm excited about this.
I'm excited. That book comes out in October, so let's plan to discuss it in December or late November, since I imagine October will be busy.
Really?
First, God willing. If not, there's a problem. This was super fun. Thank you both for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for putting this together.
Thank you for watching. If you watched, maybe no one will, but that'll be fine too. All right, I'm gonna stop recording.